The plane was cruising peacefully at 35,000 feet, the soft hum of the engines filling the cabin, when my sister leaned over with her usual smirk and whispered just loud enough for others to hear. "Oh look, the great fighter pilot, stuck in economy with the rest of us. Guess those fancy skills don't mean much here." Her words stung more than I wanted to admit. I had spent years flying combat missions, defending my country, and training harder than most could imagine. Yet here I was, reduced in her eyes to nothing more than her sibling she could mock. Passengers chuckled softly, some even throwing glances at me, while she basked in her own little moment of victory. I clenched my jaw and stayed silent, telling myself it wasn't worth it. She had always found ways to belittle me, to strip away the pride I carried in my uniform. But then, as if fate was tired of her taunts, the calm broke in an instant. A sudden jolt shook the entire plane. Oxygen masks dropped. Screams filled the air as the cabin lights flickered. A violent shudder rattled through the fuselage, and the captain's panicked voice broke over the intercom. "We've lost engine 2, stand by." I could hear the strain in his voice. I could feel the fear spreading like fire through the passengers. In that moment everything changed. The mocking smile vanished from my sister's face, replaced with wide-eyed fear. And for the first time in a long while, I knew exactly what to do. My skills weren't useless. They were about to save every soul on this plane, including the sister who had just tried to humiliate me. The cabin lights glowed dimly, casting a soft yellow hue over rows of tired passengers. The hum of the engines filled the air with a steady rhythm, almost like a lullaby for those who wanted to sleep. Flight attendants moved gracefully up and down the aisle, offering drinks and snacks, while the occasional child's laughter broke the otherwise calm atmosphere. I sat in my window seat, arms folded, watching clouds drift beneath us like endless waves of cotton. It should have been a peaceful moment, but sitting next to me was the one person in the world who could turn serenity into frustration. My sister Claire. Claire had always been sharp-tongued, the kind of person who found flaws in everyone, but she saved her sharpest remarks for me. I had long since learned to ignore them, though it was never easy. Just as I closed my eyes to relax, I heard her familiar voice dripping with sarcasm. "Well, well," she said loud enough for the nearby passengers to hear. "Look at you now, the big bad fighter pilot. I expected you to be in first class, not crammed here with the rest of us mere mortals." A few heads turned, and some people smiled awkwardly, not sure whether to laugh or pretend they hadn't heard. I clenched my jaw but stayed silent. She smirked, sensing victory in my silence, and leaned closer. "Tell me, how many lives have you saved lately?" "Oh wait, none. Because you're just my brother, and right now, you're as helpless as the rest of us on this plane." Her words burned. I wanted to tell her about the missions I had flown, about the lives I had protected from danger, about the nights I lay awake haunted by the things I had seen. But I didn't. Because Claire wouldn't understand. To her, I was simply the sibling she could needle and mock, the one she could drag down whenever she felt insecure. I turned my face toward the window, letting her words bounce off me, though they left small bruises on my pride. I had always loved flying, the freedom, the rush, the sense of responsibility that came with knowing hundreds of lives could depend on you in a single moment. In the cockpit of a fighter jet, I was confident, composed, and sharp. Yet here, confined to a passenger seat, stripped of authority and uniform, I felt exposed and ordinary. Claire knew that, and she relished it. As the flight continued, her chatter grew louder. She bragged about her new promotion at work, about the designer bag she had bought in Paris, about how she always managed to get what she wanted. Each story carried a subtle edge, a comparison designed to make me feel like less. "You see," she said, sipping her soda with exaggerated elegance, "I make my way in the world without risking my life in a metal coffin in the sky. And people respect me for it." I glanced at her, then back at the wing outside. The sun was beginning to dip, painting the horizon in brilliant shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful, but I couldn't enjoy it. Her words rang in my ears, and I wondered if she had any idea how much weight they carried. Did she know how many times I had put my life on the line? How many times I had been one mistake away from never coming home? Probably not. And maybe she didn't care. The plane shuddered slightly as it passed through light turbulence, causing a few gasps from nervous passengers. I barely noticed. Turbulence was nothing compared to the violent shakes of a combat aircraft under fire. But Claire jumped, gripping the armrest, then laughed it off nervously. See, this is why I hate flying. Honestly, if anything happened up here, I don't think even you could save us. She said it half jokingly, but the jab still cut deep. I forced a small smile, pretending her words didn't sting. Inside, though, I thought of the training I had endured, the simulations I had aced, the emergencies I had survived. Saving people was my job, my purpose, my entire life. But how could I explain that to someone who saw only the surface? Someone who thought heroism was just a title to mock. The flight attendants came by again, checking seatbelts and trays, preparing for the dinner service. The smell of reheated meals began to drift through the cabin. People chatted softly or watched movies on their screens, while the hum of the engines carried on as steady as ever. To most, it was just another flight, just another routine trip through the skies. But something gnawed at me, a strange unease I couldn't shake. Maybe it was the way Claire's mockery had stripped me down, or maybe it was a pilot's instinct, the quiet awareness that peace can vanish in a heartbeat. Flying had taught me that calm skies could hide storms, and silence could precede disaster. Claire was still talking, but I had tuned her out. My focus shifted to the faint creaks of the fuselage, the subtle vibration in the floor, the occasional flicker in the cabin lights. To the untrained eye, everything looked normal. To me, it felt slightly off, like a puzzle missing a piece. I didn't say anything yet. I didn't want to alarm anyone, least of all my sister, who would probably turn it into another joke. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and tried to steady my mind. I thought about the skies I had flown through in the past, storms lit by flashes of lightning, deserts shimmering in the heat, mountains rising like walls against the horizon. I thought of the men and women I had flown beside, some who had made it home, some who hadn't. Their faces came back to me, etched in memory, reminding me why I had chosen this path. Then I opened my eyes again and looked at Claire. She was scrolling through her phone, shaking her head at something on the screen. Her earlier smugness still plastered on her face. She couldn't know, that the very skills she mocked might soon become her lifeline. Because in just a few minutes, everything was going to change. The hum of the engines would not remain steady. The calm atmosphere would shatter. Fear would sweep through the cabin like wildfire. And my sister, my fiercest critic, would watch in horror as the brother she mocked would rise to become the only hope for her survival. The first jolt was sharp enough to knock a half-empty cup of soda from the tray in front of me, spilling cold liquid across my lap. Gasps rippled through the cabin as the plane shuddered violently. Overhead compartments rattled, and a child began to cry somewhere near the middle of the aircraft. Claire's smug smile evaporated in an instant, replaced by wide-eyed fear. She gripped the armrest with white knuckles, her phone slipping from her hand and landing on the floor. Another jolt followed, this one stronger, throwing a few passengers forward against their seatbelts. Oxygen masks didn't drop yet, but the way the fuselage groaned told me something was terribly wrong. The captain's calm voice crackled over the intercom, though the strain in his tone betrayed the gravity of the situation. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some unexpected turbulence. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. Flight attendants, please take your seats immediately. The turbulence didn't feel routine. I'd flown through storms that shook jets like toys, but this wasn't just rough air. It was mechanical, inconsistent, like something failing deep within the plane itself. My instincts sharpened, that familiar switch inside me flipping from passive passenger to fighter pilot. I pressed my hand against the window and felt the vibration running through the fuselage. Something in the engines wasn't right. The lights flickered, dimmed, then came back with a sickly glow. People were murmuring now, panic bubbling just beneath the surface. Claire turned to me, her bravado gone. "What's happening? Is this normal?" Her voice trembled, nothing like the confident, mocking tone from earlier. For a moment I considered snapping back, reminding her of her earlier words, but fear had stripped her down to something fragile. I couldn't add to that. "It's not normal," I said quietly, my eyes locked on the wing outside. "But stay calm. Panicking won't help." Suddenly, a deafening boom shook the plane, followed by the unmistakable whine of a failing engine. The cabin tilted violently to one side as the left wing dipped lower, sending passengers screaming and grabbing at anything solid. Overhead bins popped open, spilling bags into the aisles. The oxygen masks dropped with a hiss, dangling like lifelines in front of every seat. The captain's voice returned, strained and broken by static. "We've lost engine 2, attempting to stabilize." The flight attendants struggled to calm passengers, shouting instructions over the chaos. A man 2 rows ahead fumbled with his mask, pulling it down for his child before securing his own. Claire yanked at hers with shaking hands, and I helped her slip it over her face before pulling mine on. Her eyes locked on mine, wide with terror, silently pleading for reassurance. Through the window, I could see the left engine sputtering, flames licking out in short bursts before fading. The sound of the right engine roared louder, straining as it tried to compensate. My heart pounded, but my mind was razor sharp. I'd trained for emergencies, though never from the perspective of a passenger, but the principles were the same. The plane was wounded but not lost. Not yet. I unbuckled my seatbelt as the attendants yelled for everyone to stay seated. Claire grabbed my arm desperately. "What are you doing?" "Sit down," she cried, her voice muffled through the mask. "I need to get to the cockpit," I said firmly. "They'll need help." Her grip tightened, her nails digging into my sleeve. "You can't. You're not, this isn't. I'm exactly who they need right now," I cut in, meeting her panicked gaze. She hesitated, then let go, tears brimming in her eyes. For once, she had no mocking words, no sharp retort. It was fear. I steadied myself against the seats as I moved up the aisle. The plane lurched again, sending me stumbling into another passenger's shoulder. People were crying, praying, clutching each other as though their grip could anchor them against the chaos. The flight attendants looked torn between restraining me and letting me go, but one glance at my determined expression was enough. "Cockpit!" I shouted over the noise. She nodded, her face pale, and motioned me through. When I reached the cockpit door, it opened just as I raised my fist to knock. The co-pilot's face was drenched in sweat, panic in his eyes. He looked me up and down like he didn't know whether to throw me out or drag me in. "Who are you?" he demanded. "I'm a fighter pilot," I said without hesitation. "Let me help." The captain twisted in his seat, his hands white-knuckled on the controls. "We're losing her fast. Can you handle this bird?" His voice was hoarse, desperate. "I can help you stabilize," I said, sliding into the jump seat behind them. "Tell me what's working and what's dead." The cockpit was chaos. Alarms blaring, red lights flashing across the panels, warning messages scrolling endlessly. One engine was completely offline. The other was overheating. Fuel readings flickered dangerously low on one side, meaning fuel wasn't being distributed evenly. If the imbalance continued, the plane could roll uncontrollably. "Reroute power from the auxiliary," I barked, already scanning the overhead switches. "Feather the left engine. Shut it down completely before it tears itself apart. Trim the rudder 3 degrees right. Compensate for the yaw." My voice was firm, commanding, the tone of someone who had been here before, though never with so many innocent lives at stake. The captain hesitated only a moment before following my instructions. Slowly, agonizingly, the plane steadied a fraction. The tilt lessened. The wild shuddering softened into a vibration. It was still bad, but it wasn't freefall. Not anymore. The co-pilot looked at me like I'd just pulled them back from the abyss. "Who the hell are you?" he asked again, but this time there was awe in his voice. "Just a brother on vacation," I said grimly, keeping my eyes on the instruments. "But right now, I'm the best chance you've got." Behind the sealed door, I knew passengers were clinging to hope, praying silently, crying into oxygen masks. And I knew my sister was sitting there, realizing that the brother she mocked, the one she belittled, was the only thing standing between her and a fiery end. But there was no time to dwell on that. The storm outside was building, lightning flashing through the clouds. The nearest safe landing was still more than an hour away, and this crippled plane wasn't going to make it easy. We had bought time, but survival was far from certain. The cockpit was alive with noise. Alarms shrieking, switches clicking, the strained whine of the right engine clawing to keep us airborne. The captain gripped the yoke tightly, sweat running down his temple. His breaths shallow and uneven. The co-pilot's hands darted across the panels, silencing some alarms only for new ones to flare up seconds later. I sat strapped into the jump seat, my eyes darting between instruments, instinct carving through the chaos. Fighter jets weren't this forgiving. Every malfunction in combat was usually the last. But commercial jets were different. Massive, lumbering beasts with their own stubborn will to survive. If we could nurse her through this storm, we might have a chance. Lightning flashed outside the cockpit window, a brilliant white tearing across the sky. A second later, thunder rumbled, muffled through the fuselage but loud enough to make my pulse quicken. Rain streaked across the glass, heavy sheets hammering the wings. The turbulence grew worse, jolting the aircraft like a toy tossed in the hands of a careless child. The cabin behind us erupted with fresh cries, muffled through the thick door, but I could imagine the terror. Children screaming, adults praying, my sister gripping her mask with tears streaking down her face. "We're losing altitude," the captain muttered, his voice tight. "We can't hold this heading. The storm's eating us alive." "Divert south," I said quickly. My eyes locked on the radar, glowing green with swirls of red and orange storm cells. "Thread the gap between these two fronts. If we push into the core, we'll break apart." The co-pilot glanced back at me, hesitating, but the captain nodded grimly and banked the aircraft slightly, following my command. The plane groaned, fighting the shift, the right engine straining louder. Every sound was amplified in my mind. The creak of the frame, the sputter of fuel pumps, the shrill warnings that kept flashing like red sirens in my vision. I leaned forward, scanning the engine readings. The right engine's overheating. If it fails, we're gliding a brick with wings. Keep the nose steady, don't overcompensate. She wants to roll left. Fight it gently, not with brute force. The captain adjusted. His movements smoother now, more controlled. His eyes flicking between me and the instruments. He wasn't just listening, he was trusting me. That realization added weight to my chest. Hundreds of lives hung in this cramped cockpit, and for the first time since boarding, I wasn't just a passenger. I was back where I belonged, in control even if indirectly. Behind us, a sudden bang echoed through the fuselage, followed by panicked screams. My heart skipped. I grabbed the radio, switching channels. "Cabin crew report." I barked, my voice steady despite the adrenaline surging in my veins. The reply came crackling back. "We've got a ruptured overhead bin, some injuries, minor so far, but passengers are panicking. We need reassurance." I exhaled, trying to ground myself. Fear was contagious. If the passengers believed they were doomed, chaos would do more damage than the storm. I looked at the captain. "Put me on the PA." He hesitated, then nodded. The co-pilot flicked a switch, and suddenly the cabin was connected to my voice. I pressed the button, steadying my tone, keeping it calm and authoritative. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Lieutenant Commander Daniel Hayes. Some of you may know me as a passenger, but I am also a trained fighter pilot with years of experience handling emergencies in the sky. I am assisting your flight crew, and I want you to know we are fighting and we are not giving up. Stay seated, keep your belts fastened, and trust us. We will get you through this." When I released the button, silence filled the cockpit. Outside, thunder boomed again as if mocking my words. But I knew they had to hear it. People needed hope, even if it was fragile. For a brief moment I thought of Claire. I imagined her listening to my voice over the intercom, realizing that her brother, the one she ridiculed, was the reason the plane hadn't already become a fireball in the sky. The thought gave me no satisfaction, only a strange, bittersweet ache. She finally saw me, but only because disaster had forced her to. The storm thickened, turbulence tossing us like a leaf in the wind. Panels rattled, the wings flexing unnaturally with every violent shift. The co-pilot's voice cracked as he read off altitude numbers. "We're dropping too fast. At this rate. Stabilizers," I cut in sharply. "Adjust trim 5 degrees. Ease pressure on the yoke. Trust her balance. Don't fight her like she's the enemy." The captain obeyed, his movements slower, gentler, and the nose steadied slightly. The descent slowed, though we still bled altitude. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms, willing the machine to hold together. Minutes stretched like hours. Every second felt like balancing on the edge of a blade. One mistake from catastrophe. I had been in combat zones where missiles chased my tail, but this was different. This wasn't just me or my squadron. This was 300 lives, all depending on whether my knowledge was enough. The radio crackled again. "Nearest diversion airport is 200 miles south. Runway length is sufficient, but you'll need a miracle to keep her stable that long." "Then a miracle's what we'll deliver," I muttered, more to myself than anyone else. Another flash of lightning illuminated the cockpit, casting sharp shadows across our faces. For an instant, I saw my reflection in the glass, focused, jaw set, eyes burning with determination. I had been mocked, dismissed, belittled, even by my own sister. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was keeping us alive long enough to touch down on solid ground. The captain's voice broke the silence. "You've done this before, haven't you?" I nodded, eyes still fixed on the instruments. "Not with a jet this size. Not with this many souls behind me. But yes, I've flown through storms that wanted to swallow me whole. And I made it out." The co-pilot swallowed hard, his eyes wide with fear but also with a spark of hope. "Then maybe we can too." The plane jolted again, a violent drop that sent my stomach lurching. Warnings blared about hydraulic pressure. I gritted my teeth, barking new orders. "Switch to backup systems, reroute flow. Don't let the controls stiffen. If we lose hydraulics, we lose her." The captain obeyed, his face pale but resolute. The aircraft shivered, then steadied once more. We were still bleeding altitude, but slower, more controlled. As the cockpit quieted for a moment, my thoughts slipped back to Claire. I pictured her alone in her seat, clutching her mask, trembling like the rest. For the first time, I hoped she was thinking about more than her own fear. I hoped she was realizing the truth, that all those years I spent training, all those battles I fought, had led to this moment. That her brother, the one she dismissed as just a man in a uniform, was the reason her heart was still beating. But I couldn't dwell. Not yet. The storm still loomed, the runway still distant, the engine still screaming. We had survived the first onslaught, but the hardest part, the landing, was still ahead. I tightened the straps of the jump seat, bracing myself. This was far from over. The storm began to thin as we pushed south, but the reprieve was deceptive. Though the lightning strikes were less frequent and the clouds less violent, the aircraft remained unstable, shuddering like an injured beast fighting to stay alive. Every second in the cockpit was a battle against failing systems and dwindling altitude. The captain's face was drawn tight, his knuckles pale against the yoke, and the co-pilot's voice cracked as he read off numbers that kept dipping dangerously. We had leveled somewhat, but it was far from enough. 200 miles to the diversion airport might as well have been 1,000. "Fuel imbalance worsening," the co-pilot muttered, tapping the screen in disbelief as if sheer will might fix it. "If we don't correct, we'll roll uncontrollably to the left," I finished for him. My fighter pilot training spoke before my fear could. "Cross-feed the tanks manually. Don't trust the automatic system. It's already failing. We can equalize just enough to keep her steady." He hesitated. "That's risky. So is falling out of the sky," I snapped, though my tone wasn't anger, it was urgency. He obeyed, flicking switches, the hum of pumps changing as the fuel began to reroute. The captain stole a quick glance at me. "Can we make it?" I didn't answer right away. My eyes were locked on the horizon. In the faint distance, through breaks in the storm, I could see the glimmer of runway lights, tiny dots of salvation piercing the darkness. Relief washed through me for a moment, but it was brief. We were still losing altitude too quickly. The right engine groaned, coughing like it was about to give up. The hydraulics were weakening again, the controls stiffening beneath the captain's hands. It was a miracle we'd made it this far. "We'll try," I said finally, my voice low but steady. "But this landing won't be pretty. We've got one shot." Behind us the cabin was chaos. Though the thick cockpit door muffled most of it, the cries of children and the sobs of terrified adults still leaked through, haunting reminders of the lives at stake. I imagined the fear on each face, the mother clutching her child, the elderly man whispering prayers, the young couple holding hands tightly as though their grip might anchor them to this world. And then there was Claire, my sister. I pictured her sitting stiffly in her seat, her mask pressed to her face, her eyes wide as she replayed every cruel word she'd spoken to me. For the first time I wondered if she was sorry. The radio crackled, ground control cutting in. "Flight 382, we have you on radar. Winds are gusting 20 knots crosswind. Only one runway clear. Emergency crews are standing by." Crosswind. My stomach tightened. With one engine dead and the other barely holding, fighting a strong crosswind on approach would be like balancing a coin on its edge during an earthquake. One wrong move and we wouldn't touch down. We'd cartwheel across the runway in flames. "Do we divert to another airport?" the co-pilot asked, his voice rising with panic. "No," I said instantly. "She won't make it. This is it. We land here or we don't land at all." The cockpit fell into tense silence. The captain adjusted the heading, lining us up with the faint runway lights. Rain lashed at the windshield, streaking across the glass like claws. The altitude ticked lower and lower, too low for comfort, too high for safety. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, but my mind was calm, sharp, a razor edge honed from years of training. This was the moment my entire career had prepared me for. I leaned closer to the captain, my voice steady. "Listen to me. You're going to keep her nose slightly higher than normal. If we come in too steep, she'll slam down and break apart. Use the rudder sparingly, let me call corrections. And whatever happens, do not cut throttle on the right engine until the wheels touch. It's the only thing keeping us airborne." He nodded, his breathing uneven but his eyes resolute. The co-pilot gripped his controls like a lifeline, ready to back up every move. The runway grew larger in the window, the lights piercing through sheets of rain. The plane shuddered violently, as if it sensed the ground approaching. Oxygen masks swayed in the cabin, passengers screaming as the descent grew rougher. I imagined Claire's face again, pale and wet with tears, and for the first time since childhood, I wanted nothing more than to protect her. "Altitude 1,000 feet, the co-pilot announced. "Steady," I said firmly. "You've got this." "Crosswind pushing hard," the captain shouted, wrestling with the yoke. The nose veered left, then right. I barked corrections, my voice sharp and clipped. "Rudder. Nose up. Don't overcorrect." The ground loomed closer, every second a hammer blow against my ribs. The right engine screamed louder, vibrating through the entire aircraft. Warning alarms blared. "Sink rate. Sink rate." The automated voice chanted mercilessly. 500 feet, the co-pilot yelled. The runway lights blurred through the rain. My palms were slick with sweat as I gripped the edge of my seat, shouting over the alarms. "Hold her steady. Gentle on the flare." The captain's breaths came in ragged gasps as he fought the controls. The aircraft bucked, the crosswind slamming us sideways. For a terrifying moment it felt like we would roll. "Correct. Correct. Nose up," I screamed. 200 feet. The runway rushed up at us, a streak of light and rain. Passengers shrieked, the sound piercing even through the sealed cockpit. My heart hammered so hard it felt like it might burst from my chest. 100 feet. The wheels kissed the tarmac with a bone-jarring thud. The entire aircraft bounced once, the landing gear groaning in protest. For a split second I thought we'd lost it. Then the captain slammed the brakes, the roar deafening, the plane skidding violently across the wet runway. Sparks flew as the metal screeched against asphalt. The emergency cruise lights flashed through the sheets of rain. "Hold her! Hold her!" shouted. The plane skidded, fishtailing dangerously. Then, with a final bone-rattling shudder, it slowed, the brakes screaming until the momentum finally died. The aircraft lurched to a stop, tilted slightly but intact. For a moment there was silence. Shocking, heavy silence. No alarms, no screams. Just the hiss of rain against metal. Then from the cabin an eruption of sound. Cheers, sobs, cries of relief. People clung to one another, their joy raw and unrestrained. I slumped back in my seat, my body trembling from the adrenaline, my breaths shallow. The captain looked at me with wide eyes, his voice hoarse. We made it." I nodded slowly, still staring at the rain-slicked runway. "We made it." But in my mind, one image lingered above all others. My sister's tear-streaked face, waiting just beyond the cockpit door. The silence after the stop felt unreal, like the air itself was holding its breath. For a few long moments no one moved, no one spoke. Then the sobbing began, soft at first, then rising in waves as passengers realized they were alive. Children cried into their parents' shoulders, adults clutched each other in relief, and flight attendants went aisle to aisle, assuring everyone that help was moments away. Emergency vehicles swarmed the runway, their flashing red and blue lights painting streaks across the rain-slicked windows. We had done it, we had survived. I stayed in the jump seat for a moment longer, staring at the controls, my chest heaving as the adrenaline drained from my body. My hands trembled slightly, the weight of what we had just pulled off pressing down on me. The captain sat slumped over, his knuckles still gripping the yoke as if he didn't dare let go. The co-pilot leaned back in his chair, eyes closed, whispering something under his breath. Prayer, gratitude, or disbelief, I couldn't tell. "You kept us alive," the captain said finally, his voice raw. He turned his head toward me, his expression heavy with awe. "If you hadn't been here..." His words trailed off unfinished, but I understood. I didn't answer. There was nothing to say. It wasn't heroism. It wasn't glory. It was survival. And survival often felt less like triumph and more like exhaustion. When the cabin door finally opened, the sound of voices and movement poured in. Passengers stood shakily, gathering their belongings as instructed, some too weak from relief to do more than stumble forward. I stepped out of the cockpit, bracing myself for the sight I knew I'd find. Claire was standing a few rows down, her mask pulled away, her face pale and streaked with tears. When her eyes found me, she froze. For the first time in years, she didn't smirk, didn't roll her eyes, didn't lace her words with sarcasm. She just stared, her lips trembling as if searching for something to say. I walked slowly toward her, the cabin buzzing with murmurs and thank yous from passengers who touched my arm or whispered blessings as I passed. Their gratitude washed over me, humbling and surreal, but my focus was fixed on my sister. When I reached her row, she stumbled forward, almost tripping in her rush. Without a word, she threw her arms around me, clinging with a desperation I had never felt from her before. Her body shook against mine as sobs racked her chest. I stood stiffly at first, stunned, then slowly wrapped my arms around her, holding her tightly. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice muffled against my shoulder. "I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have. I never should have treated you like that." Her words came in broken fragments between sobs. "You saved us. You saved me. And all this time I mocked you. I didn't know. I didn't see you." I closed my eyes, feeling her tears soak into my shirt. For years, her words had cut me, chipped away at my pride, made me doubt whether she would ever respect me. Now, in the wreckage of fear, she was stripped bare. No arrogance, no smugness, only raw truth. "You don't have to say anything," I said quietly. "We're alive. That's all that matters." But she pulled back, her hands gripping my arms tightly, her eyes red and swollen. "No, it does matter. I need you to know I've been wrong. About everything. You're not just my brother. You're a hero. And I'll never forget what you did today." Her words pierced deeper than any insult ever had. For the first time they carried weight not because they hurt but because they healed. I nodded slowly, unable to trust my voice. The evacuation began, orderly but tense. Passengers filed down the aisles, clutching bags and holding children close, guided by flight attendants toward the inflatable slides now unfurled outside. Emergency crews shouted instructions, their reflective vests glowing under the flashing lights. Rain continued to pour, soaking everyone who stepped onto the runway, but no one cared. Every face was lit with gratitude, disbelief, and the fragile joy of survival. When Claire and I finally descended the slide and stepped onto the wet asphalt, the reality hit me fully. The plane loomed above us, battered but intact, smoke curling faintly from the dead engine. Fire trucks stood by, hoses ready, though the danger had passed. Ambulances waited, paramedics rushing forward to check for injuries. The scene was chaos, but beneath it all was relief. An unspoken miracle that 300 souls had walked away from what should have been tragedy. Passengers gathered in small clusters, some hugging, some praying, some simply staring at the plane as though it were both monster and savior. A few approached me directly, shaking my hand, thanking me with tears in their eyes. I nodded humbly, offering small words of reassurance, though the weight of their gratitude felt too heavy to carry. Claire never left my side. She clung to my arm as though afraid I might vanish, her earlier confidence and pride completely stripped away. She looked at me differently now, not as her brother to mock, but as the man who had pulled her back from the edge of death. As the chaos settled, I found myself standing a few feet away from the plane, staring up at it. My reflection shimmered faintly in a puddle at my feet, distorted by raindrops. I thought of every moment that had led me here. Every drill, every mission, every loss, every insult I'd endured from the very person I had just saved. It all felt strangely necessary, as though this was the moment it had all been building toward. Claire's hand slipped into mine. I looked at her surprised, and she gave me a small, broken smile. "You'll never hear me mock you again," she said softly. "Not after tonight. You've given me more than I deserve. You gave me another chance to live. To see you for who you really are." For once, there was no bitterness in my chest, no need to prove myself, no hunger for validation. I didn't need her apology. I didn't need her words. But I accepted them because they meant something, something I had quietly longed for, even if I hadn't admitted it. The captain approached then, his face weary but lit with gratitude. He extended his hand, gripping mine firmly. "You saved us, Lieutenant Commander Hayes. Don't ever forget that." I nodded, my voice calm but certain. "We saved each other." As the emergency crews ushered passengers toward buses that would take us to shelter, I glanced back one last time at the plane. It stood scarred, broken but still upright, a testament to survival against impossible odds. Much like us, walking toward the waiting buses, Claire leaned her head on my shoulder, her voice barely audible over the rain. "You're not just my brother," she whispered. "You're my hero." And in that moment, for the first time in my life, I believe she truly meant it. Backhand index pointing right if you enjoyed this story. Don't forget to like, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Backhand index pointing right. Subscribe to Twisted Fate Chronicle for more shocking twists and powerful life stories.